Mongoose sent me a new bike. This is a Ripsaw. This is a 27.5 plus wheeled mountain bike. These are sold at Walmart and they're currently around $329. That's an appealing price for a 27.5 plus mountain bike, but it does put it at the next level of pricing, and by big box bike standards, I think it's probably a mid-level tiered bike. And looking at the components, I see a few things that I like. X5 shifters, even has a 2x crankset, and a cassette, a 10-speed cassette. And the Ripsaw has a rigid fork. It's aluminum like the frame, and the 27.5 plus wheel set, it has unique rims. These look like smaller versions of the fat tire rims on my Mongoose Malice. And the tan sidewalled tires, those are Chang Yang branded. I'm not making that up. They're 27.5 by 2.8. And the brakes are mechanical, but there is a 180mm rotor up front. I usually lead off with a full spec rundown, but I'll get to the rest of it in a bit because I wanted to get this on the trail because I was curious how this was going to do two areas in particular. And it didn't let me down on hard-pack single track. It does quite well there. And those Chang Yang 2.8s, they do a good job grabbing onto the trails, even on roots and looser sections. And thanks to the gearing, I can hit and hold 22 miles per hour on the flat areas. And the 2x10 also gives me the low gearing to make climbing less of a task. Well, gearing and traction from those tires, but the 10 in the back, that's also helpful, especially on areas where it's going up and down and there's quick transitions where I don't have the time to work between two sets of gears. And all this would be super fun if it weren't for two things. There's a warm-up loop that I always take new bikes on the trail to kind of fill them out and see if there are any areas that I need to pay attention to. And this bike has an aluminum rigid fork and it is torture on rooty trails. I could tell right away this was going to be a bouncy ride up front. I know you're probably saying, Kev, but this is a plus wheeled bike, shouldn't that absorb some of the bouncing? Normally, yes, but that's thing number two. These tires have a minimum PSI rating of 30. My other plus size tires have a max PSI of 25. Pair high PSI with a rigid fork and it's a bumpy affair. That means I have to be selective with where I can ride and slow things down in some cases to a crawl. All that aside, on select trails, 30 PSI rigid fork and all, the bike is still fun. I can tell this isn't the average big box bike, and it's probably not a premium tier bike by any stretch, but it's definitely rugged for its price in my opinion. After the first few minutes, my first thought was to take the 3.0 tires I pulled off Project Hydro after stage 2, but this frame, as good as it feels, it doesn't flex much, but aluminum does have some give. I think these 2.8s are probably going to be the fattest this will accept. The bike itself, as a mountain bike, I think it's probably pretty capable, at least for the average trail and for people that can ride rigid fork bikes on mountain bike trails. And they used to ride rigid forks on downhill trails. I, however, am not one of those people. And that puts me in a different place on the Ripsaw, one that I think it's especially well suited. And that's as a super cool looking around town bike, all the mountain bike style, and even a little roar from those 2.8 tires. The 2x10 is also great around town, and that X7 up front, it shifts smoothly, not ultra quick, but smooth. Smooth also carries over to the X5 in the back, but it's also snappy. It can quickly move through all 10 speeds. And a bonus, that this has mountain bike DNA, a very sturdy frame and fork, so going off-road around town style is a breeze. Riding over curbs, cutting through yards, riding ravines and such, it's a joy. This is where I'm more at home with this bike. Again, your mileage may vary depending upon how much you can tolerate, but for me, I'm more at home letting these tan sidewalls roll down sidewalks, city streets, and yards. But it's still a mountain bike for the most part. Let me explain by taking a closer look at the components. I skimmed over them at the start of the video, but let's go through them bit by bit. Let's start at the alloy stem that I measured at 80mm. And the handlebars, I measured those to be 715mm. The Mongoose branded grips are attractive but a little shy on padding for a rigid fork. Generic alloy brake levers sit beside X5 trigger shifters. There's a 1 1/8 inch straight steer for that aluminum rigid fork, and it has practically no flex. It's super rigid. These rims are massive. I measured these at 2 1/4 inches from outer edge to outer edge. Now I have to admit, these Chang Yang 27.5 by 2.8s, they have nice tread, and I dig the tan sidewalls. I mean, you either do or you don't, but to me it looks great, especially standing a few feet away. And here's the minimum pressure I was talking about on these tires. I mean, 30 to 45 PSI, it's just crazy. And then looking at it, I think the fork could probably handle 3-inch tires, but in the rear, factoring in frame flex, there really isn't room for anything above 2.8. The hubs on this bike are Quando branded. The mechanical disc brakes though, they have no brand, but they do have 180mm rotors, which does help out. I'd love to see hydraulic brakes here, but the reality is at $329 for a plus wheeled bike, I just don't see that happening. And I know these cable clips are prone for popping off, but mine came out of the box with two missing. One on the fork that I replaced, and a second on the frame that I replaced, and it popped off again as soon as I turned the bars. So I used a blue zip tie that I think matches the Mongoose graphics nicely. Like the fork, the frame is aluminum and the bike weighs 31 pounds. This is a 17-inch frame with nice consistent welds, and all the graphics are clear coated. And the red, white, and baby blue accents carry over to the Mongoose branded saddle. The pedals are standard Mongoose polymer pedals, and those are fitted to Pro Wheel Zephyr 170mm crank arms. The bolt-on 2x chain rings are also Pro Wheel 36 to 22 tooth. Both derailleurs are SRAM, X7 up front and an X5 in the back. And the cassette is a Microshift H100 11 to 36 tooth 10-speed. And yes, I'm going to mention those reflectors. I mean, what were they thinking? Even if you like reflectors, you have to admit these are ugly. Reflectors aside, there just aren't that many $329 plus wheeled mountain bikes out there, so there's not a lot to choose from. And considering the price, I think if someone is dead set on a plus wheeled bike, especially to ride around town, this could be appealing. Now for trails, especially trails like mine, probably less so. That said, there may be some promise in this. I do have that 3.0 tire set. What if I used one of those tires up front to give it some extra cush on bumps? Also, I have the original fork from the Hyper Hydroform, the one that was fat tire friendly. Now I know it's still not a great fork, it's a big box cheap fork, but what would it be like on this bike? I don't know, what do you think? Comment below if you think I should give that a shot. I would put a better fork on it, but 27.5 plus force, especially finding one with a straight steer, not cheap. And that's my initial look at the Mongoose Ripsaw. And now a quick patron shout out. Today's shout out goes to Malik M. Thank you so much for being a patron. And if you want more information on becoming a patron, check the link in the description. Patrons are about to get lots of behind the scenes footage. Not just mailed out, over 30 KevCentral stickers for my patrons, and you can get one too for as little as $2 a month. But patron or not, thanks so much for being a part of this channel and for watching the videos. I appreciate each and every one of you. I hope you're subscribed and you have the notification bell active so you don't miss anything. And most importantly, I hope you have a great day.